Hello, and thanks for joining me on another episode of Zulf Talks. Working life is an interesting topic, and we all like to have loads of options to think about if we want to go into working for ourselves. There's loads of emotional sides to this as well. And today we're going to cover this from a slightly different perspective that you may not have thought about. It's always good to reflect on your emotions and see how that can help you through your career. I have got a guest with me today. She is empowering individuals to create a better future by teaching them relationship intelligence. We're going to speak to her today to find out more about this and how she can elaborate. Her mission is to provide the world with this education that has been missing for way too long so that we may become more understanding, compassionate, and connected. Railey Molinario.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. We had a little chat to start off with. We already know you've gone out with the dog for a walk, so you're nice and calm and relaxed. So we're
Yes.
going to hopefully see how we can proceed. How are you thinking about working life and relationships? Is there anything that sticks out to you that you think would be a challenge?
Work life and personal life. I think really having that balance that works for you is really important. I think a lot of times we really try to go after everything because we're amazing hard workers and we love the jobs that we do, especially when they provide so much value and they're our passion. But I think for me, one of the things that has been a struggle, at least in the beginning, was that balance between when to put my phone off, when to stop answering emails. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't have that clock in, clock out. So you have to be the one to sort of tell yourself, okay, I'm done.
Wow, so much there that you've already given me. Okay, so that's an amazing perception because a lot of people don't know when to stop, especially when you're working for yourself. It's like, oh, I've got 10 minutes. I can answer that email, but you don't think, wait a minute, I'm at home with the family. Maybe I shouldn't do that right now and have allocated times. You mentioned a little bit about balancing. Is there any tips that you think would be helpful other than turning your work life to a certain time and your home life to a certain time?
Absolutely. So I work with relationship intelligence, as you said. And one of the most important, the first step to relationship intelligence is self awareness. So being able to say to yourself, I feel overwhelmed, I feel tired, I feel disappointed, really being able to recognize how you feel in any given moment will give you the clue as to when you are at your threshold. And the second step to that is self management. So it's good to be able to identify your emotion. Now, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to be able to respond to that emotion in a way that's going to benefit you? So, there could be moments when you're starting your career where you feel, I feel really overwhelmed, but I'm going to push through it because this is something new. And that could be a beneficial way to react to your emotion. But if you really feel exhausted and you think to yourself, should I continue? Should I push through this? Or do I need a break? Because sometimes taking a break, having a cup of coffee, going for a nap, this is actually an investment because you're going to be able to relax and then come back to work when you're starting to feel more energized.
Okay, wow. So it naturally comes out. I think the qualities you've got around relationship intelligence naturally comes out. So if you're listening to this, you'll be able to resonate with some of these conversations and how that can help you. So I know looking at this, there's a few different ways we can look at emotions and how we do that. You mentioned a little bit about balancing the flow there with work life and home life. In our last episode, we had a guest on DJ, and he was talking about taking risks in business and being entrepreneurs. And I understand now that ties in nicely with what you've said there, because at times you will take risks to maybe get a new business venture deal. However, it's important to consider that risk has the risk of losing potentially money, but also emotional risk is a really big one. Like how you feel, are you overwhelmed? Do you need to maybe take a break? That's really important to consider. A lot of people don't think about that, especially during this journey. So it's nice to have a point of reference where, you know what, take a bit of time, think about it and relax. So maybe we're taking like a mindfulness session for like 5 or 10 minutes where you can reflect on that. So I like you mentioned that. That's really important. And it's glad that you're taking that message out there. you've got a few options for what you do. Are you providing one-to-one coaching to people? Like, can you tell me a bit about this so I understand from your point of view how you kind of adapt what you teach to people?
Absolutely. So I primarily work with couples. I'm a love educator and relationship coach. So I do two-on-one typically, where it's me and the couple, and I basically go through with them the scientifically proven foundation for them to create a thriving relationship. We now live in a time where we have so much freedom to choose who we want to be, who we want to be in a relationship with, what kind of life we want to live, what kind of job we want to have, what kind of role we want to play in society, in our family. And so all of this freedom is a really, really beautiful thing if we know how to use it. But a lot of times we see that couples are suffering because they don't have this basic foundation.
Okay, so that ties in nicely because work life, people only associate that with work. But what you mentioned there, work can highly impact your family life. So something that you're offering now would be very important. So, for example, if we're working really hard and not spending as much time with our family, our other half, then that's where your services will come in to have a look at the holistic view, saying, actually, you know what? You're working hard. However, you might not think you need it, but you also need this support to make sure that your family life is marrying up with that. Because some people will just go really high, 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 and then forget the family side of it. And they get to a certain point where they've earned loads of money, but they don't have the people around them to celebrate with, which is a bit weird. Have you had any experiences where you can share with us something where you've had a journey where you've been able to help someone so we can get an idea of how that impacts their maybe their work life based on their family life?
Absolutely. Everything is connected. At the end of the day, we want to be happy, right? Everyone is searching for happiness. Whether you're trying to make more money, get a good job, get a girlfriend, whatever it is, we're all just looking to be happy and minimize the amount that we suffer. So when I work with couples and I teach them this foundation and they're able to create these thriving relationships, we call it becoming power couples. The relationship itself is so powerful because you have two people who are now working together, they're brainstorming, they're compromising, they're able to find solutions to their problems, support one another, and they become this really powerful team. And so that is going to affect everything else in their life. It affects their friendships, their relationships with their family, the way they show up for work, the dreams and aspirations they have for work. So everything is affected. When we're talking about relationship intelligence, we're talking about the relationship with ourselves first, and then the relationships we have with other people. This can be relationships with your partner, relationships at work. We're starting to really see how important relationship intelligence is in the corporate world and how important it is for business, because you can have an amazing product, but if you don't connect with your audience, if you don't connect with the people that work with you, the business isn't going to run as successfully as it possibly can.
Yes. Okay. So touching on this further now, we've touched on like the career side of this and very like corporate environment, but it all starts from our personal journeys and how we get into this area. So a lot of people listening now will probably be at the early ages, like school or college years, where they're thinking about going into this career, and maybe they've not had the best start in life, and that can have a big impact on how people progress through their careers. Because we'll notice a lot of entrepreneurs are people that have started from very humble beginnings, where they've just started their career and they've started maybe elaborating on getting to the right goal. Is there any experience you can give to that person who's maybe had not the great start in life and what can help them to get to where they want to get?
Absolutely. That's pretty much my story in a nutshell. I grew up with my mother in an abusive household with my stepfather. My father abandoned me when I was an infant and left me in the snow. And it was just the most difficult experience, and trying to understand, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why is it so chaotic in here? And I ended up leaving home when I was 16. I was extremely book smart and street smart. I excelled in school. I was able to get a house and a car and all of those things to support myself. But internally, I was miserable. I was just about to go and work on Wall Street, which was, my dream. And I realized that I was missing something, that I had everything on the outside that people would perceive as good, as successful, but on the inside, I was completely miserable. I had really unhealthy relationships. I had anxiety and depression. And so the inside and the outside didn't match. And at that time, I was only about 21 years old. And I said, if I'm at this point already, what's the future to hold for me? And so at that moment, I realized that there was something missing. We have the book smarts, we have the street smarts, but we also have relationship intelligence, which without that, nothing else matters. You can have a big house, a big car, and we're seeing this all the time. We're seeing celebrities who we find out are internally suffering. We see a lot of people with a lot of money, successful businesses, but they don't have good relationships. And when you ask them at the end of the day which one is more important, they'll tell you the relationships.
Some amazing background there. So quite a lot to unpack. What we'll do is, I think thinking about this now, there will be a lot of people who are quite successful in life and they've done well, but then looking back on their journey, they may not appreciate how they got there. So it's very important the things you mentioned. People can often seem very confident, very outgoing, quite smart, but there is that emotional side which plays a massive part of any life. And it's really important to say, you know what, let me take a break. How can we make this better? How can I do better? I know based on what you've said so far, being street smart, being book smart, knowing your way around, that may have given you a boost. But how did you manage to get to that point when, with considering where and how things progressed for you in early life? Because that can be quite difficult. Was it the fact that you focused on something during early life? Because a lot of time when we're small, if something goes wrong, as children, we'll tend to think, oh, it's us. We won't normally think it's the family, so we end up blaming ourselves, which makes it even worse for the person who's actually suffering. It may not be their fault, but things around them cause them to worry. It's probably multiple questions there, but can you give me a bit more on that, maybe?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I had anxiety pretty much from the day that I was born. And I didn't know what it was, of course, at the time, but I was always anxious. I was having difficulty connecting with other people. I would have night sweats and nightmares almost every single night. And this was something that I just considered my normal life because I didn't know anything different. But I would say the thing that got me through was imagination and creativity. And this is really, really important when it comes to building a healthy relationship. It's having that dream and that vision of what it is that you're creating. And so for me, the thing that I think really gave me that insight is when I was in high school, I took a trip to New York City. Now, I come from a very small town where everyone is the same color, the same religion, and I don't fit into that box. And so I just thought that that's what the world looked like. And so when I went to New York City, I saw all kinds of different people, different ages, different races, different languages. And I thought, wow, there's a big world out there. So then I started to dream about travel and I started to think about all the places that I would love to go and visit. And so that imagination is what drove me to just believe that there's something outside of my current circumstances.
So, what kind of age were you at when you were thinking about traveling? Was that quite early on, or was that once you established yourself?
So that was when I was the first time was when I was 14. So when I went to New York, I went with our school choir. And that was really the first time well, myself, I went outside of my town. We didn't travel as a family. And so that was the first time I saw so many people, so many buildings, so many opportunities. And I thought, I don't like where I am, but it's possible that I can get to where there's life and there's, acceptance and there's beauty and there's information. And so I was determined to see what that was like.
So, being young, it can be quite hard to use your imagination to predict where you want to be in future. Based on where you are now and when you were smaller, did you have like a goal in mind?
I always had this imagination. And so when I was 14, I went to New York and I saw this world that was bigger than myself. And growing up, I always had different dreams about what career path I would take. The very first thing that I wanted to do was be a gymnast. I found them fascinating, the different things that they could do with their bodies and the strengths that they had. But my mom couldn't afford to put me into gymnastics. So that was the first dream that died. Then I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be in Cirque du Soleil. So I had all these dreams when it came to my actual career. So I didn't actually know what a life coach was growing up. I think Tony Robbins was the first life coach that I ever saw, and that wasn't until I was in university. But I would say that some of the things that I've done in my life, I did dream about. I sort of manifested, if you will. When I was in high school and I was 15 years old, I took my first Spanish class, my first and only Spanish class. And then when I was 22, I ended up moving to Barcelona, Spain, and spent 10 years there. And so that was pretty incredible.
Okay. So from that, that's like a typical kind of young person growing up. We'll always not know exactly where we want to go, but we discover and we look at loads of different things that would help us. So from like gymnast to lawyer, was there like a much of a thought? What gave you that idea? Because gymnast is very like self kind of, fitness type helping, but lawyer is helping other people. Was there any, do you remember why that came to bear? Did you see someone that did something?
I think just as a child in the States, you have so many possibilities and you play around with careers since you're, really little. And so the gymnast, I think I might have seen one on TV and thought, oh, I want to do that.
Okay.
But I had no idea what it entailed or anything like that. And then the lawyer came when I took a class in high school and we did the Salem witch trials. I'm from Massachusetts, and I
Okay.
was a lawyer, sort of playing
Okay.
around. And I thought, this is an incredible, incredible job. I want to do this.
Okay. So that's nice now because a lot of people will be at that point where they're trying to find the right path to take. And there's nothing wrong with trying lots of different things to find out what you like and what works well for you. Like, for example, now you've landed in a career that you're enjoying and you're able to share. And even listening to you, it sounds like you're already passionate about it, which is great. And having that option there lets listeners know that, you know what, you've got loads of things you can think of. So don't limit yourself. Carry on looking at what you like to do. And ideally, if you can do it more than once or twice, because sometimes people try something new and it doesn't really work out. We discussed that with one of our previous guests in an episode. You need to at least spend a week or two trying to get to the point where you understand what it is you like, what it is you don't like, and then pursuing more of what you like, which works out nicely for all of us. So I'm glad we're talking about this today. It's definitely interesting and giving us some more perspectives. Going back to earlier life, when you left college or high school, what was your next step in terms of progression?
Yes, so I left home when I was 16. I was still in high school. The environment at home got so intense that I felt that I wasn't safe. And so I made the decision to make it in the world on my own. And I continued in high school in a different state, ended up getting a scholarship to go to university. And I went to school for 2 degrees, finance and hospitality. And my plan was to work on Wall Street because at that moment I thought, well, why do we get jobs? We get jobs to make money. And so that's the job that I thought that was going to make me a lot of money. And again, thinking from my intellectual brain, not my emotional brain, I didn't think about all that would entail to work on Wall Street. I just thought, sure, it makes logical sense. And when I left the United States and I went to Spain, it was really for me leaving behind the idea that I'm only going to focus on that book smart and street smart. It was really about me connecting to this relationship intelligence. I felt that in by me going to a different country and exploring and really finding who I am deeper inside rather than just what can I do, that was a crazy, crazy, beautiful, wonderful experience for me. And I can say now that the job that I do is, a wonderful job because it's not only something that makes good money, but I get to help people and it's my passion. The idea that I was so unloved as a child and now I teach people how to express love is the most incredible feeling in the world.
I think that puts you in the ideal place because you've experienced what it's like not to feel love. So you can ask the right questions, tell the right experiences. So it's nice to have it from someone that's actually been through that situation because sometimes you'll hear it from people saying, oh, you should do this, should that. But you can tell that they've not really experienced it. So having it firsthand, which is basically what we talk about on the podcast, everything we do through our working life, we're just giving conversations to say this is what you should think about. So it's more of a conversation. And then having coaching or therapy or even speaking to someone about it doesn't feel like it's a chore. It's more like you're just discussing and finding what works to get through this busy life, basically. I want to touch back on what you said there because you made the choice to kind of leave your family and do it on your own. That's a really big decision, and I'm surprised that at an early age you were able to make that confidently. How did that perspire for you?
I would say that I did it scared. I did it
Okay.
terrified. And I think that's really what bravery is. It's not to say that brave people don't get scared, but they do it anyway. And so I was young, I was ignorant, I didn't have this relationship intelligence. I suffered from anxiety and depression, but I did it anyway because I knew that my life was on the line. I was turning into someone who is very bitter and resentful and really just so angry about what happened to me. And so when I decided to leave, I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I had a chance to make a different life for myself.
So that's going to be an interesting area now. So it's very hard if you get into an area where it's a bit of a slump and you're down and you're not feeling great. Trying to get yourself back out of that is very hard. How did you find getting like, because you're more motivated now? Obviously, it's a long time ago, but still that plays a factor in life. How do you like to get out of like dips, as they would say?
Absolutely. So when I left home, I decided that I was going to leave my home behind, but everything came with me. The trauma, the disappointment, the resentment, and I lived that throughout my university years. I would tell anyone and everyone my story. And I wasn't telling them the same way that I tell people today in this inspirational way, in this motivating way. I was telling them in the way of feel sorry for me. And this is, and, sort of using it as an excuse of this is why I am this way. And so it got to a point where I started to become a person who was in this cycle of self-sabotage. And I decided one day that I decided that that was the only thing that I had left to do. I was extremely miserable. Again, I had the house, I had the car, I had the university degree, I was going to work on Wall Street. Everything from the outside looked perfect, but I felt like my life was never going to get better. And so I ended up going to a hotel room. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And that was really the day that I thought was going to be my last. But in that moment, when I had that last thought before I made that decision, I asked myself, I said, Riley, do you want to die or do you want the pain to stop? And so once I made that distinction that the two are not the same, I said, actually, I do want to live. If I could have a different life, I would want to experience that. So it's not that I just don't want to be here anymore. I just want to end the suffering. And I thought to myself, I'm extremely smart. Again, book smart, street smart. I can do this. I don't know what I don't know, but I can figure it out.
Wow. Okay. So luckily, we've got you here still today with us. That's amazing. So you made the right decision. But having that option in your brain, you were able to say to yourself, good life versus bad life. Do I want to change what I do? But some people don't have that way of thinking where they start slumping. They're going to stay in that slump for a long time. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of celebrities that have had this kind of arena where they've ended up taking their lives, and it's very sad stories. If anything, they've got more people watching them, but they're alone. So it's very difficult for like more higher celebrities as well. But going along this route, if you're thinking about maybe going through a certain career path and it's going to lead you to where you're going to question yourself, it's worth checking out additional working options. This is more speaking to the listeners today, just so that if you're in this situation, there are services out there to help someone speak to you, because it's always good to speak to someone, talk to someone. Like you mentioned today, Riley, it's interesting to have people speak to you and talk to you about it from a point of view of, you know what, I had that, it's part of my life, I understand it, but now I'm using it as a motivator to get to where I want to get to. So it's always good to look at the positive side of these types of things. It can be difficult while you're going through them, but having some friends, family, even helplines out there designed to maybe give you a conversation. So do make sure you reach out. Even here, if you have any difficulties you're listening, you can go on to zulftalks.com and you can reach out. We can actually speak to you, and anything we can do, we can help just to get you into the right mindset. Because ultimately, in this life, it is all about kind of making everybody happy, trying your best to make people be happy. It's not about the money side of it. The money side comes, people that have made money will always say, we've got the money, but you know what? It's not all that. Like you mentioned, you've got the car, you've got everything you want, but you want the core happiness, and that's what gets you through life. So I really appreciate you speaking to me today. Where else can people hear more about you?
Absolutely. So I am very active on Instagram. I do Instagram lives twice a week, answering questions and giving tips and tools and techniques so that people can understand exactly what relationship intelligence is, how it works, really easy and simple takeaways to better the relationship with themselves and with other people. I also have lots of free tools and techniques on my website. So you can go to RaileyMolinario.com and there's tons of information on there as well.
You will find all of this in the show notes, and you can pick that up from the information. There will be links directly set up there. I've purposely kept this episode slightly shorter than normal because I think there's quite a lot here to unpack, and possibly we might speak on a further episode where we'll go into it in more detail because we touched on a number of interesting topics today. And it's always worth reflecting and giving them time to simmer. So have a think about this until the next episode, and also comment and let us know if there's any specific areas you want us to cover. Thank you for being with us today, and it's been zulftalks.com.